1 hour, so I have to shortcut. First of all, maybe I want to say thank you for your presence today, the negotiation with the North Korea. Then now, I'm sure the peace of the East Asia will be guaranteed for a while. Okay. It was the 1973 or 2 when I visited the foreign countries the first time in my life. It was the America, the United States. And 2 years later, I had a chance to sail in the Texas Houston on the mountain. And at that moment, I watched a movie. I still remember the comedian say that your president had a very successful trip to Japan. And they were very happy to meet the man who ruled the country they owned. Hirohito gave the Jews sword that pressed the imperial will of the shining sun, and the president gave him a wind button, saying, "We will the American wearing these." And Hirohito said, "No, we make them." That was very old comedy. And maybe 2 decades ago, Japan might be China, and I'm afraid tomorrow it will be North Korea. But what I want to say is the political condition or circumstances is changing rapidly in the decade period. But think in the century or 2 centuries, maybe natural disasters condition or weak point of this city is not changed, still the same. But some technologies or infrastructure we will or develop. But if the natural disaster hit us more bigger than attack us, it is a very important thing to share such information how to evacuate within a limited time. So first of all, as I show you the very short video, and that explains you the weak point of the west side of Osaka, a larger area is lower than sea level. And because of that, we have suffered from the huge damage of the typhoon in our history. But fighting with that, now we are ready to protect from that. That means the natural disaster that we get used to attack. The bigger one will not. And maybe for Americans, easy understanding, the Greece on the first page, there's the 4 circles in the colors red and green or yellow. This is a way of the typical Japanese thinking. So third way is you're developing and turning the subject. It's from the childhood we are trained to discuss with them. So while you're talking with a Japanese person, maybe you might ask by yourself what this person wants to insist. Because of the order of that the discussion, we are trained to say something like that. But for the generally speaking, this station is open for everybody, but main target, main guest is Japanese people. So all the exhibition or movie made by the order of that 4 circles. Anyway, seeing is the better understanding. You are standing on the surface of the sea, and maybe more than the 30 or 40 times we are hit by typhoon every year. And the average typhoon the sea level is designed of the same height of the average typhoon here. And when the typhoon is such a standard size, when you're standing on the surface of the water, and then try to see inside of the Osaka city, You see only walls. It's very hard for you to see inside this wall. Because all the city is protected by the hospital. And for your easy understanding, we cut off here. The real thing is not cut off. Those priests, see, and come inside and see what is what we call the 0 meter area. The area where the below the sea level. And this is one of the bottom, and the other was this fall. The plane is raising out. So the three started from that movie, so that day, takes only 1 hour to raise the time. So for the, they are getting used to evacuate onto the second floor, because this is the average time of the storm surge. So maybe the evacuation to the second floor and safely down, generally speaking. But 3 people back home is not such a condition. Those who are evacuated as usual was sacrificed. And you see the red line, the highest one, that is a result of the last year's vaccine number 21. Because, first of all, I just want to introduce the main concept of law, the natural disaster protection based on law. The idea is very easy. We never repeat the same affair again. So according to that idea, when we design, we start with that. It was the worst natural disaster. For example, before the typhoon, the biggest one at that anywhere in this country. And suppose that typhoon is attacking here in Osaka in the worst conditions. How high are estimated and designed to make the criteria. So as long as the natural disaster was such a thing that we had experienced before, we are ready to protect it. So that's why even the typhoon is bigger than 3 another bigger one, we could protect the city. But we had simulated a very huge free waterway. If some trouble happened and we couldn't shut it off at that moment, we would blast, and the total damage will have calculated to be there are Japanese, maybe 70 billion people. So IR or the Expo 2025 would be gone, but we could do it. But for another, in future, maybe there's some problem. So with using the software, that meaning the evacuation, is the only one method that we could save our lives. That's a very important thing to share concerning that information. And would you please see this small map? This is the Osaka city. And those areas, like I told you, the under sea level, the total width is around 40 square meters. And there will be more than 1 million people to be around 1.08 people. And around here, this is the Osaka Castle. They stand at the hilly places. It used to be the peninsula, but the west side of that peninsula, it used to be the bottom of the sea. This is a map of only 1,600 years ago. This is the location of Osaka Castle. So including your office, just next to me, it used to be the bottom of the sea. So that is essentially these area has such a weak point. If the natural disaster break our hardware, only one method we can save our life is evacuation. I already use a very easy answer, so I have to ask the we, including the United States, are located on the north side of the state, so the linkage like the border of the air.
本日は津波高潮ステーションにお越しくださいまして誠にありがとうございます。ご来館の皆様にご案内申し上げます。まもなく第2キューブ津波災害体感シアターにおきまして津波災害を音と映像で体感するシアター上映を行います。津波の恐ろしさや津波への対策を学ぶことができるシアター映像です。第2キューブ津波災害体感シアターにどうぞお越しくださいませ。ご来館の皆様に重ねてご案内申し上げます。まもなく第2キューブ津波災害体感シアターにおきまして津波災害の予測を映像で体感するシアター上映を行います。第2キューブ津波災害体感シアターにどうぞお越しください。
Most of the children are very happy to see the news when they see that tomorrow the typhoon will attack Osaka. We're very happy. Why? Right. But why we made such a rule is original this time. Because that year, in the year of 1934, at that moment most of the schools wooden made. The wooden structure strong to some extent with the pressure, pushing pressure. But once the roll comes inside, it's something like an explosion. And a lot of school was destroyed. And worst thing is the typhoon was landed in a weekday after the 9 a.m. So everybody go to school. And we couldn't stay there. And as a result, totally 676 children lost their life, and adding the 18 teachers that were saved. And after that, I told you we don't want to repeat the affair again. The direct reason is the structure of the school itself. So we decided to rebuild the wooden structure into a reinforced concrete building. But it takes a long time because in this country there are so many numerous number of schools. And the others say that during the reconstruction of the school, the same size type of even what should we do? And then in the case of the government issued the wind alarm, every actually extended the natural protection area, or maybe Europe office also shut our door, unrestricted all the they were very happy without knowing this kind of thing. If you have a chance to visit the Osaka castle, in the southern edge there's a huge tower saying the education tower. This is all children lost their lives. But after the disaster, even before the completion of the school building, it started to learn outside. So maybe if you have the time for you to get something here. After the typhoon, you have so many dangerous experiences, so now you're safe now. But on the other hand, in the case of the tsunami, successful idea of the fighting with the water. Because this is the main bridge that spans the water. And this is the ocean side. Here is the land side. And scale is 1 to 100. So 1 centimeter stands for 1 meter. And you see the top of this fence. You find the difference between the base side and the inner side. This height is such a surprising height because this is the biggest height we have suffered. It was the Ise-1 typhoon that suppose Ise-1 typhoon affecting Osaka in the worst conditions. Still saving now. It's shut. But for the usual use, lots of naval transportation is on their economic activities. It's a bad choice to shut every time the trade is happening. So usually, raising up the water wall is another method to protect the life of the season of the Osaka. And there's some problem. The Osaka has a very long history. There's some bridge that constructed the wall. And if we try to break that bridge, maybe we have to raise up the wall to the bridge and the another land use just to raise up. And there's so many now around 800 bridges exist in the Osaka city. So it means if our choice is raising up the bridge itself, maybe you have to mount up the ceiling itself, the ridiculous choice. So usually we come up walls. And according to the information of alert from the Shocho national government, in the private group, the other pit shut this other pit. And this was this used to be used in the fight. That's already retired 2 years ago. The weight is around 3.8 tons. The same weight of the two automobiles. Help to sell it. This is for the emergency. If the adult cannot help to shut it, even the small children can. And now it is automatic electrically control. Remote. We have a remote control system, but it is also usually set on the street. So the main purpose of what we have to do is to maintain the safety, traffic safety, to disperse the people in the best way. So in the worst case, nobody come here to make a remote control. Usually, one person has what we call the sleep-over down. Usually, they are the ordinary citizens, and the different public servants. Because in the case of they are injured or lost their life, the government pays tax. Usually no pay to this kind of people. And their group has a very serious problem that is an easy problem. Usually, at the age of 16 years old, the Japanese person retired from the company. And some enter this group, and they have the celebration party. Younger person that comes, younger than 16 years old. He has gone 2 years ago, but until the age of 95 years, he can start cooperation. So a little bit later, I will introduce some after our awful experience from the 2011 tsunami, a lot of people try to study in a different position. And many psychologists pointed out we human beings, as one of the animals, cannot judge correctly if we face only such experiences we have never experienced before. And generally speaking, we make a mistake. So after that, we checked it. There is some mistake. We improved it. In Japanese, we say it kaizen. That's a good way to progress. But in the case of the natural disaster like tsunami, misunderstanding can usually lose your life. And this is the statue of the replica. The real thing is located 700 meters from that direction. And before that, I would say that some small disaster history. This is a time chart. Now we are living around here. The last big earthquake following tsunami was such a year of the end of the World War II. So we have a few years of that. And the former one was the 1854. And after this tsunami, this stone monument was settled. And concerning about another memories of our ancestor, of this Howe earthquake, it was hit Osaka in the year of the 1707, 147 years before this one. And in the circus, they say that more than 10,000 people lost their life in Osaka in that disaster. And this is a Buddhist monk who dedicated for those people who lost their life. And when it happened, in the background there's so many letters, all Japanese style letters, so it's very hurtful to read it. But you can imagine the newspaper in our days. And if you read it in your, you will see some vision of this picture. Because they are afraid of dying from the destroyed wooden structure, wooden houses. They might think it is the best way to evacuate on the river or the bridge, or at least near the water, because not only the crash of the wooden building, but also at that moment the buildings are built by wood or paper. So once it hit fire, it's very easy to spread. So they are also afraid of the fire system. So easy understanding is better choice to stay near the water. And this is at that moment. First, the big Earnsei Tokai earthquake hit Tokyo and Nagoya area. And there's no such a huge earthquake in Osaka area. So people just scared of the huge shaking. And 32 years later, we are attacked by Nankai earthquake. And at that moment, a lot of people evacuated onto such a place as near the river. And first of all, the water tried to invade in the open space, like the river mouth. And the water can concentrate into it. And lots of people lost their life. And some said, some survivor, our ancestor survived that disaster, said in my house there is some old saying, lots of, it is 147 years ago, there occurred the same things. So we couldn't learn the lesson from that. And we had to repeat it. They regret it. So they have made these statues. And so 90% was what has happened, they said. This sentence, I try to read and directly translate. I hope those who are hard-hearted person to put the black ink in here to make our descendant easy to read. And the 90%, they say what had happened. The last sentence is what not to do. That is the lessons. To be correct. After shaking, don't get close to the river or bridge. And as I was added one more information. This is another stone monument, which was built in the Sakai city, the southern neighboring city of Osaka. And it is said that in the case of the huge earthquake, get together here, they evacuate here, and they keep the roof. And in Osaka, around 10,000 people lost their life. The same day in Sakai, this is about the lessons from past disaster. So today, receiving this kind of the basic thought, using some modern technology, made some boring courses like. So in that stage, I just want to show you some information. How many time do you have? Or where is the very dangerous place? This map is watching Osaka City from the aircraft. And the color area is in the case of the huge tsunami hit here, it will be flooded. And how many times do you have it? You see the flag hanging from the ceiling. The end of the picture is the border line of the Osaka prefecture and Wakayama prefecture. That is very easy to understanding. The atom is the tick. So after shaking around 18 so I was wondering if you were staying in our office or in the CBD area of the center area